The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace, as Sergeant Marcus Thompson adjusted his ceremonial uniform. He had been working with the Royal Guard horses for 15 years, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold on this seemingly ordinary Tuesday in September. Thunder, a magnificent black stallion standing 17 hands high, had always been the pride of the household cavalry. His coat gleamed like polished obsidian, and his powerful frame commanded respect from both tourists and fellow guardsmen alike. For 3 years, Thunder had performed his duties flawlessly, standing motionless for hours during ceremonies, carrying his rider with dignity through the streets of London, and maintaining the stoic composure expected of a Royal Guard horse. But on this particular morning, something was different. As Marcus approached Thunder's stall, he noticed the horse's ears were pinned back, and his normally calm brown eyes held an unusual intensity. The stable hands had reported that Thunder had been restless throughout the night, pacing in his stall and refusing his evening feed. "Easy there, boy," Marcus whispered, extending his hand slowly toward the horse's muzzle. Thunder's nostrils flared as he caught the familiar scent of his handler, but instead of the usual gentle nuzzle, the stallion tossed his head and stepped backward, his hooves clattering against the stone floor. The other horses in the stable began to shift uneasily, sensing Thunder's agitation. Duchess, a gentle bay mare known for her calm temperament, whinnied softly from the adjacent stall. Even Storm, the oldest horse in the regiment at 22 years, lifted his graying head to observe the commotion. Marcus had seen horses have bad days before, but Thunder's behavior was unprecedented. The stallion had always been a model of discipline and control. Royal Guard horses underwent years of specialized training to prepare them for the chaos of London streets, the flash of cameras, and the presence of large crowds. They were conditioned to remain calm in situations that would spook ordinary horses. As the morning progressed, other members of the cavalry arrived to prepare for the daily changing of the guard ceremony. Captain Elizabeth Hayes, the commanding officer of the mounted unit, made her usual rounds through the stables. Her experienced eye immediately picked up on Thunder's unusual state. "How long has he been like this?" she asked Marcus, keeping her voice low and steady. "Started last night, ma'am. The night shift said he barely touched his feed and kept moving around his stall. I've never seen him refuse his oats before." Captain Hayes approached Thunder with the confidence that came from 2 decades of working with horses. She had handled everything from spooked colts to injured veterans, but even she was surprised by Thunder's reaction to her presence. The stallion's ears flattened completely against his head, and he bared his teeth in an unmistakable display of aggression. "Well, that's certainly not normal behavior for our Thunder," she said, stepping back to give the horse space. "Have the veterinarian examine him immediately. We can't have him in this state for today's ceremony." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the royal veterinarian, arrived within the hour. She had been caring for the guard horses for 8 years and knew each animal's personality and health history intimately. Thunder had always been one of her easiest patients, standing quietly for examinations and treatments without the need for restraints or sedation. But today was different. As soon as Dr. Mitchell entered the stall, Thunder reared up on his hind legs, his front hooves pawing the air dangerously close to her head. The veterinarian quickly exited the stall and observed the horse from outside the safety of the metal bars. "His vital signs appear normal from what I can see," she told Captain Hayes. "Heart rate is elevated, but that could be due to stress or agitation. Without being able to perform a proper hands-on examination, it's difficult to determine if there's an underlying medical issue." The morning ceremony was approaching rapidly, and a decision had to be made. Thunder was scheduled to carry Trooper James Wilson, a young guardsman who had only recently qualified for ceremonial duties. The thought of putting an inexperienced rider on an unpredictable horse sent chills down Marcus's spine. "We'll have to substitute another horse," Captain Hayes decided. "I won't risk the safety of our personnel or the public, but finding a suitable replacement on such short notice proved challenging." The horses were matched to specific riders based on size, temperament, and experience. Thunder's usual backup, a chestnut gelding named Apollo, was recovering from a minor injury and not cleared for duty. As the stable crew worked frantically to reorganize the horse assignments, Thunder's behavior became even more erratic. He began kicking at the walls of his stall, the thunderous sound echoing through the stable complex. Other horses became increasingly nervous, with several beginning to pace and whinny. The commotion attracted the attention of palace security, who were always vigilant about any unusual activity that might affect the day's ceremonial schedule. The changing of the guard ceremony was one of London's most popular tourist attractions, drawing thousands of visitors daily, and any disruption could have serious implications. Marcus watched helplessly as Thunder continued his display of agitation. The horse that had been his faithful partner for years seemed like a completely different animal. The transformation was so dramatic that it left everyone puzzled and concerned about what could have triggered such a radical change in behavior. Little did they know that Thunder's outburst was just the beginning of a series of extraordinary events that would challenge everything they thought they knew about these magnificent animals and their role in one of Britain's most cherished traditions. The changing of the guard ceremony proceeded without Thunder, but the unusual events of the morning had left the entire cavalry unit on edge. As tourists gathered outside Buckingham Palace, cameras ready to capture the spectacular display of British pageantry, the guards maintained their professional composure despite the chaos that had unfolded in the stables just hours earlier. Trooper Wilson rode Majesty, a reliable gray mare who had been quickly pressed into service as Thunder's replacement. While the ceremony appeared flawless to the watching crowds, those in the know could sense the underlying tension among the mounted guards. Back in the stables, Thunder's condition had not improved. If anything, his agitation seemed to be intensifying as the day wore on. Dr. Mitchell had managed to sedate the stallion lightly, but even under the influence of mild tranquilizers, he remained restless and unpredictable. "I've seen post-traumatic stress in horses before," she explained to Captain Hayes as they observed Thunder from a safe distance. "Sometimes a specific trigger can cause a complete behavioral change, but usually there's an identifiable cause, a loud noise, an accident, or some form of trauma." Marcus racked his brain trying to think of anything unusual that might have affected Thunder in recent days. The horse's routine had been completely normal. He had performed admirably during the previous week's ceremonies, had enjoyed his regular exercise sessions in Hyde Park, and had shown no signs of illness or distress. "What about the new construction work near the palace?" suggested Trooper Wilson, who had returned from the ceremony and was still wearing his ceremonial uniform. "They started that renovation project on the East Wing last week. Maybe the noise is bothering him?" It was a reasonable theory, but Marcus shook his head. "Thunder's been exposed to construction noise before. Remember when they repaired the courtyard last year? He didn't bat an eye at the jackhammers and cement mixers." As afternoon turned to evening, Thunder's behavior took an even stranger turn. The aggressive outbursts that had characterized his morning gave way to something entirely different. The stallion began exhibiting signs of extreme anxiety, pressing himself into the corner of his stall and trembling as if he were terrified of something invisible. The other horses in the stable seemed to pick up on Thunder's fear. Duchess began pacing nervously in her stall, while Storm repeatedly looked toward the stable entrance as if expecting some unseen threat to appear. Even the normally unflappable Wellington, a veteran horse who had served in multiple royal weddings and state occasions, showed signs of unease. "It's like they're all sensing something we can't," observed Private Sarah Collins, one of the younger stable hands. She had been working with horses since childhood and had developed an almost intuitive understanding of equine behavior. Dr. Mitchell decided to stay overnight at the stables to monitor Thunder's condition. She had dealt with similar cases in civilian horses, but never in an animal with Thunder's level of training and experience. Royal Guard horses were selected not just for their physical attributes, but for their psychological stability and ability to remain calm under pressure. Around midnight, Thunder's behavior reached a new level of intensity. He began calling out with loud, distressed whinnies that echoed through the entire stable complex. The sound was unlike anything the staff had heard before, not the typical neigh of a horse seeking attention or food, but something that seemed to convey genuine distress or warning. The night security guards reported that other animals in the area seemed to be responding to Thunder's calls. Dogs in nearby neighborhoods began howling, and even the palace's resident cats appeared agitated, hiding in unusual places and refusing to come out for their evening feeding. Marcus, who had insisted on staying close to monitor his horse, noticed something peculiar about the timing of Thunder's outbursts. They seemed to occur in regular intervals, almost as if the horse was following some internal clock or responding to a stimulus that human senses couldn't detect. "He's calling out every 23 minutes, Marcus observed, checking his watch, as Thunder let out another series of distressed whinnies. "It's been consistent for the past 3 hours. Dr. Mitchell made note of this pattern, though she couldn't immediately explain its significance. In her years of veterinary practice, she had never encountered such precisely timed behavioral episodes in any animal. As dawn approached, exhaustion was beginning to take its toll on everyone involved. The stable staff had been on high alert for nearly 24 hours, and the constant stress was wearing on both humans and horses alike. Captain Hayes had reported the situation to her superiors, and there was growing concern about how this might affect the following day's ceremonial duties. But just as the first rays of sunlight began filtering through the stable windows, Thunder's behavior underwent another dramatic shift. The frantic calling stopped abruptly, and the stallion moved to the center of his stall, standing perfectly still with his ears pricked forward in an attitude of intense listening. The sudden silence was almost more unsettling than the previous hours of distressed calling. Every person in the stable held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The other horses, too, seemed to sense that something significant was occurring, and they all turned their attention toward Thunder's stall. Then, without warning, Thunder did something that defied all explanation and left everyone present questioning everything they thought they knew about animal behavior. The magnificent stallion began moving in a precise pattern within his stall, stepping in what appeared to be a deliberate sequence of movements that seemed almost ritualistic in nature. The pattern was complex and repetitive, involving specific steps forward, backward, and to each side, performed with the kind of precision usually reserved for the most advanced dressage movements. But Thunder had never received such specialized training, and the movement seemed to serve no practical purpose that anyone could identify. As the stable staff watched in amazement, Thunder continued his mysterious routine, repeating the same sequence over and over with mechanical precision. His eyes remained fixed on something beyond the stable walls, as if he were responding to instructions that only he could hear. The sight was both beautiful and deeply unsettling, and it marked the beginning of an even stranger phase in what was rapidly becoming the most bizarre incident in the long history of the Royal Guard horses. Word of Thunder's strange behavior had spread throughout the palace by morning, reaching the attention of officials who rarely concerned themselves with the day-to-day operations of the stables. The Queen's private secretary made an unprecedented visit to observe the situation firsthand, accompanied by the palace's head of security and a behavioral specialist who had been hastily summoned from the Royal Veterinary College. Dr. Amanda Foster, the behavioral specialist, arrived with a team of graduate students and sophisticated monitoring equipment. She had studied unusual animal behaviors for over 20 years, but the reports she had received about Thunder's condition seemed almost too extraordinary to believe. "I need to observe him for several hours before making any conclusions," she told Captain Hayes as they set up cameras and sensors around Thunder's stall. "What you're describing sounds like a form of complex behavioral conditioning, but without an obvious trigger or reward system." Thunder continued his precise routine, seemingly oblivious to the growing crowd of observers. The pattern had evolved throughout the morning, becoming even more intricate. He would perform a series of steps, pause for exactly 30 seconds, then repeat the sequence with minor variations that followed no discernible logic. Marcus had documented every movement, creating a detailed chart that looked more like a dance notation than a record of animal behavior. "He's added new elements every few hours," he explained to Dr. Foster. "It's like he's building on what he learned before, making it more complex." The other horses in the stable had begun exhibiting their own unusual behaviors. Duchess had started, moving in synchronization with Thunder, performing a simplified version of his routine from her own stall. Storm, despite his advanced age, was attempting to follow along, though his arthritic joints prevented him from matching the precision of the younger horses. "It's like they're all participating in some kind of collective behavior," observed one of Dr. Foster's students, who was filming the interactions between the horses. I've never seen anything like this level of coordination without human training. By noon, the situation had attracted attention from beyond the palace walls. News of the royal guard horses' bizarre behavior had leaked to the press, though the official palace statement described it only as routine veterinary care for one of our ceremonial horses. However, social media was buzzing with rumors and speculation from palace staff and visitors who had witnessed glimpses of the unusual activity. The timing couldn't have been worse. A state visit from the President of France was scheduled for the following week, with elaborate ceremonial processions planned that would showcase the finest traditions of British pageantry. The thought of the royal guard horses performing their mysterious routine in front of international dignitaries and television cameras sent palace officials into a panic. "We need to understand what's causing this behavior and how to stop it," declared Sir Richard Pemberton, the palace's deputy master of the horse. "The reputation of the entire household cavalry is at stake." Dr. Foster's initial observations were troubling. "The movements appear to be purposeful rather than random," she reported. "Thunder isn't acting on instinct or responding to stress. He's following a complex pattern that suggests a level of cognitive processing we don't typically associate with horses." The mystery deepened when Thunder's routine began to influence horses in other royal stables. Reports came in from Windsor Castle that their ceremonial horses were displaying similar behaviors, though less complex in nature. At first, officials dismissed these reports as copycat behavior or coincidence, but the consistency of the accounts was impossible to ignore. Dr. Mitchell expanded her investigation to include environmental factors that might affect multiple locations. She tested for unusual electromagnetic activity, changes in atmospheric pressure, and even lunar cycles, but found nothing that could explain the widespread nature of the phenomenon. "What if it's not environmental?" suggested Private Collins during one of the evening briefings. "What if Thunder is somehow communicating with the other horses? Maybe they have ways of sharing information that we don't understand." The idea seemed far-fetched, but Dr. Foster found it intriguing. "There have been documented cases of animals exhibiting collective behaviors in response to natural disasters or other environmental changes," she mused. "Horses are particularly sensitive to subtle changes in their environment that humans might miss." As the third day of Thunder's unusual behavior began, the situation took another unexpected turn. The stallion stopped his routine abruptly and moved to the front of his stall, pressing his nose against the bars and looking directly at Marcus with an intensity that was both familiar and completely alien. For the first time since the episode began, Thunder seemed to recognize his handler. But instead of the warm greeting Marcus expected, the horse began a new behavior that left everyone stunned. Thunder started nodding his head in a deliberate pattern. 3 quick nods, followed by a pause, then 2 longer nods, another pause, then a single emphatic nod. "He's trying to tell us something," Marcus whispered, his voice filled with awe and concern. "I've worked with horses for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. It's like he's developed his own language." The pattern of nods was repeated dozens of times, always in the same sequence. Dr. Foster's team recorded every instance, searching for variations or changes that might provide clues to its meaning. But Thunder's message, if that's what it was, remained consistent and incomprehensible to human observers. The other horses began responding to Thunder's new communication method. Duchess would answer with her own series of head movements, while Storm would paw the ground in rhythmic patterns that seemed to correspond to Thunder's signals. "We're witnessing something unprecedented in animal behavior," Dr. Foster told the assembled officials. "These horses are engaging in what appears to be structured communication, using symbols and patterns that suggest a level of abstract thinking we've never documented in equines." The implications were staggering. If horses were capable of this level of complex communication, it would revolutionize understanding of animal intelligence and force a complete re-evaluation of how humans interacted with these magnificent creatures. But, as fascinating as the scientific implications were, the immediate practical concerns remained. The horses couldn't continue their mysterious behaviors indefinitely, especially with important ceremonial duties approaching. The stress on both animals and handlers was mounting, and there was no indication that Thunder and his companions were anywhere close to returning to normal behavior. As night fell on the third day, Thunder's routine entered yet another phase, one that would prove even more remarkable than anything that had come before. The fourth night brought the most extraordinary development yet. Thunder began creating sounds that no horse had ever been documented making before. These weren't the typical whinnies, neighs, or snorts familiar to anyone who worked with horses. Instead, Thunder was producing a series of low, rhythmic vocalizations that seemed almost musical in nature. Dr. Foster's audio equipment picked up frequencies and patterns that defied conventional understanding of equine vocal capabilities. The sounds had a haunting melodic quality that reminded listeners of whale songs or the complex vocalizations of dolphins. Some of the stable staff reported feeling strangely moved by the sounds, as if Thunder was trying to convey deep emotional meaning through his unusual voice. The acoustic analysis shows harmonic structures that are incredibly sophisticated, explained Dr. James Wright, an acoustic specialist who had been called in to study Thunder's vocalizations. These patterns require precise control of breathing and vocal cord tension that shouldn't be possible for a horse's anatomy. Marcus sat beside Thunder's stall throughout the night, listening to the extraordinary performance. After 3 days of watching his beloved horse behave in ways that challenged everything he knew about animal behavior, he had developed a theory that he was hesitant to share with the scientific experts. What if Thunder isn't sick or stressed? He finally said during the morning briefing. What if he's trying to teach us something? Every behavior has been deliberate and purposeful. The timing, the patterns, the sounds, it's all too organized to be random. Dr. Foster had been considering the same possibility. If that's the case, we need to try a different approach. Instead of trying to stop his behavior, maybe we should try to understand what he's attempting to communicate. The decision was made to bring in Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a specialist in animal-human communication who had achieved remarkable success working with dolphins and great apes. Her methods were unconventional, but had produced results that traditional veterinary science couldn't explain. Dr. Rodriguez arrived that afternoon and immediately requested time alone with Thunder. Animals often shut down their natural communication attempts when they sense human skepticism or fear, she explained. I need to establish trust and demonstrate that I'm genuinely trying to understand. What happened next would be talked about in scientific circles for years to come. Dr. Rodriguez entered Thunder's stall, the first person to do so safely since his behavior began. Instead of trying to examine or calm the horse, she simply sat in the corner and began responding to Thunder's vocalizations with sounds of her own. For the first hour, Thunder ignored her presence, continuing his mysterious routine and unusual songs. But gradually his attention began to focus on the human who was attempting to communicate in his new language. The horse approached Dr. Rodriguez slowly, his head tilted in an expression of curiosity rather than aggression. Then Thunder did something that made everyone watching hold their breath. He gently placed his muzzle against Dr. Rodriguez's hand and began producing a new type of sound, softer, more conversational, almost like he was trying to speak to her directly. He's responding to communication attempts, Dr. Rodriguez reported quietly, not wanting to break the delicate connection she had established. His vocalizations changed depending on whether I respond or remain silent. This is definitely intentional communication, not random behavior. Over the next several hours, Dr. Rodriguez and Thunder engaged in what could only be described as a conversation. The horse would produce a series of sounds, wait for her response, then continue based on what she offered in return. The exchange had the rhythm and flow of dialogue between two intelligent beings attempting to bridge a language barrier. The other horses watched this interaction with intense interest. Duchess began adding her own vocalizations to the conversation, while Storm positioned himself as close as possible to observe the unprecedented exchange. Even Wellington, typically the most reserved of the guard horses, showed signs of wanting to participate. We're witnessing the emergence of a new form of interspecies communication, Dr. Foster whispered to Captain Hayes. This could change everything we know about animal intelligence and consciousness. As evening approached, Thunder's behavior entered another new phase. He began using his hooves to create patterns in the straw on his stall floor. These weren't random scratchings, but deliberate designs that seemed to correspond to his vocal patterns. Each sound sequence was accompanied by specific markings, as if Thunder was developing a written component to complement his spoken language. Dr. Rodriguez documented every pattern, noting the correlation between sounds and symbols. "He's creating a multimodal communication system," she explained. "Visual symbols combined with vocal signals. This level of abstraction is remarkable for any animal, let alone a horse." The patterns Thunder created were intricate and varied, but they followed consistent rules that suggested an underlying grammatical structure. Some designs were simple, circles and lines arranged in basic configurations. Others were complex geometric patterns that seemed to represent more sophisticated concepts. Marcus studied the floor patterns intensively, trying to find connections to Thunder's previous training or experiences. "Some of these shapes remind me of the dressage movements he knows," he observed. "Maybe he's using familiar concepts as a foundation for expressing new ideas." The breakthrough came when Dr. Rodriguez realized that Thunder's patterns weren't random arrangements, but actually represented spatial relationships. The horse was drawing maps, not of physical locations, but of concepts and connections that existed in his mind. "He's showing us how he thinks," she announced with excitement. "These patterns represent relationships between ideas, memories, and emotions. Thunder is literally drawing us a picture of his consciousness." The implications were staggering. If horses possessed this level of abstract thinking and symbolic representation, it would require a complete reevaluation of animal cognition and rights. The scientific community would be forced to acknowledge that the line between human and animal intelligence was far less clear than previously believed. But even as the researchers celebrated their remarkable discoveries, practical concerns remained pressing. Thunder's extraordinary abilities had captured the attention of media outlets worldwide, and public interest was reaching a fever pitch. Crowds of curious onlookers had begun gathering outside the palace gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of the miraculous horse who seemed to have developed human-like intelligence overnight. The pressure to return Thunder to normal ceremonial duties was mounting, but Dr. Rodriguez strongly advised against any attempts to suppress his new behaviors. "We may never again have an opportunity to communicate with a non-human intelligence at this level," she argued. "Thunder is offering us insights into consciousness itself." As the fourth day drew to a close, Thunder began incorporating his human observers into his elaborate communication system, addressing specific individuals with distinct vocal and visual patterns. It became clear that he was not only aware of the humans studying him, but was actively trying to teach them his newly discovered language. By the fifth day, Thunder's extraordinary abilities had attracted international attention from scientists, philosophers, and government officials. The palace found itself at the center of a global debate about animal consciousness and rights. Protesters gathered outside demanding that Thunder be protected as a sentient being, while skeptical scientists called for rigorous testing to verify the claims being made about his intelligence. Dr. Rodriguez had spent countless hours in communication with Thunder, and their relationship had evolved into something unprecedented in the history of animal-human interaction. The horse had learned to recognize and respond to human words, while Dr. Rodriguez had become proficient in Thunder's unique language of sounds and symbols. "He's been trying to tell us about his experiences as a guard horse," she explained to the assembled team of researchers and officials. "The patterns he draws represent memories, ceremonies he's participated in, places he's been, people he's encountered. He has detailed recollections going back years." Thunder had created an elaborate visual diary on his stall floor, with different symbols representing various aspects of his life. A complex spiral pattern seemed to represent the feeling of crowds during ceremonies, while geometric lines indicated the routes he had traveled through London. Most remarkably, he had developed specific symbols for individual humans, creating detailed portraits in abstract form. Marcus was moved to discover that Thunder had created an intricate symbol specifically for him, a combination of circles and curved lines that somehow captured the essence of their relationship. "He remembers everything," Marcus said with tears in his eyes. Every training session, every ride, every moment we've shared. And he's been aware, truly aware this whole time. The other guard horses had begun developing their own communication abilities, though none as sophisticated as Thunder's. Kligu could create simple symbols and had learned to respond to basic vocal cues from Dr. Rodriguez. Storm, despite his age, showed remarkable aptitude for the new language, perhaps drawing on decades of accumulated experience and observation. Wellington surprised everyone by revealing an unexpected artistic talent. His floor patterns were not just communicative but genuinely beautiful, with flowing designs that resembled Celtic knots or mandala patterns. The old horse seemed to take pleasure in the creative process, spending hours refining and perfecting his artistic expressions. We're seeing the emergence of horse culture, Dr. Foster observed. They're not just communicating, they're creating art, sharing knowledge, and building a collective understanding that transcends individual experience. The phenomenon had spread to royal stables across Britain and even to some civilian facilities. Reports came in from horse owners whose animals had suddenly begun exhibiting unusual behaviors, creating patterns, making new sounds, and showing signs of heightened awareness and intelligence. Social media exploded with videos of horses seemingly attempting to communicate with their human companions. While most of these cases were less dramatic than Thunder's transformation, the pattern was unmistakable. Something was happening to horses around the world, and Thunder appeared to be at the center of it. Religious leaders began weighing in on the implications of Thunder's abilities. Some saw it as evidence of divine intervention, while others worried about the theological implications of animals possessing souls and consciousness equivalent to humans. The Archbishop of Canterbury issued a carefully worded statement, acknowledging the profound mystery of Thunder's condition while calling for careful study and respectful treatment of all creatures. Scientists from around the world descended on London, eager to study Thunder and his companions. The palace stables were transformed into an impromptu research facility, with equipment and experts from fields ranging from neuroscience to linguistics. The horses seemed to enjoy the attention, often performing elaborate displays for visiting. Researchers Dr. Michael Chen, a neuroscientist from Cambridge, brought portable brain imaging equipment to study Thunder's neural activity during communication sessions. The results were extraordinary. Thunder's brain showed patterns of activity similar to those seen in humans during complex language processing and creative thought. His neural patterns suggest that he's not just mimicking learned behaviors. Dr. Chen explained, Thunder is genuinely thinking, planning, and creating new ideas. The level of activity in areas associated with abstract reasoning and emotional processing is remarkable. The economic implications of the discovery were beginning to emerge. If horses possessed this level of intelligence and consciousness, questions arose about the ethics of using them for labor, entertainment, or even ceremonial purposes. Animal rights organizations called for immediate changes to laws governing the treatment of horses and other potentially sentient animals. The palace faced an unprecedented dilemma. Thunder and his companions could no longer be viewed simply as ceremonial animals. They were individuals with complex inner lives, creative abilities, and the capacity for sophisticated communication. The traditional relationship between humans and horses had been forever changed. Captain Hayes found herself grappling with questions she had never imagined. If Thunder can think and feel and communicate like this, what does that mean for our entire program? She asked Dr. Rodriguez. Are we partners now instead of trainer and animal? Do we need to ask permission before asking them to perform ceremonial duties? Thunder seemed to understand the human's dilemma and began creating symbols that appeared to address their concerns. His pattern suggested that he enjoyed his role as a guard horse and took pride in the ceremonies and traditions he helped maintain. But he also expressed a desire for recognition as an individual with his own thoughts and feelings. The relationship between Thunder and Marcus evolved dramatically as they learned to communicate directly. Marcus discovered that Thunder had always been aware of his emotions and had often tried to provide comfort during difficult times. The horse had memories of specific moments when Marcus had been sad or stressed, and had deliberately behaved in ways designed to help his human partner feel better. All these years I thought I was taking care of him, Marcus reflected. But he was taking care of me too in ways I never realized. He's not just intelligent, he's compassionate and empathetic in ways that put many humans to shame. As the fifth day drew to a close, Thunder began preparing for what Dr. Rodriguez sensed would be another significant development. His patterns became more complex and urgent, and his vocalizations took on a quality that seemed to anticipate something important about to happen. The other horses gathered as close as possible to Thunder's stall, as if they too were expecting a momentous revelation. The sixth day brought the most remarkable revelation of all. Thunder's behavior had been building toward this moment, a final demonstration that would forever change humanity's relationship with the animal kingdom. As dawn broke over Buckingham Palace, Thunder began creating his most complex pattern yet, one that would take him most of the day to complete. Dr. Rodriguez watched in fascination as Thunder carefully arranged straw, pebbles, and even small pieces of his feed into an intricate design that covered nearly his entire stall floor. The pattern was unlike anything he had created before, a masterpiece of abstract art that seemed to pulse with meaning and emotion. He's creating a manifesto, Dr. Rodriguez realized as the pattern took shape. This isn't just communication. It's a statement about consciousness, about the inner lives of animals, about the connections between all living beings. The design incorporated elements from all of Thunder's previous patterns but arranged them in a new configuration that suggested relationships and hierarchies of meaning. At the center was a complex spiral that seemed to represent the essence of awareness itself, surrounded by symbols that depicted various forms of life and consciousness. As Thunder worked on his creation, the other horses contributed their own elements to the design from their adjacent stalls. Duchess added flowing lines that connected Thunder's central spiral to smaller patterns of her own creation. Storm contributed geometric elements that spoke of wisdom and experience, while Wellington's artistic flourishes added beauty and grace to the collaborative masterpiece. By afternoon, researchers from around the world were gathered to witness what many believed would be a historic moment in the evolution of interspecies communication. Thunder's pattern was nearly complete, but something was still missing. The horse stood in the center of his creation, vocalizing in his mysterious language while looking directly at the assembled humans. Dr. Rodriguez entered the stall once more, positioning herself carefully to avoid disturbing Thunder's artwork. As she had done throughout their remarkable week together, she began responding to Thunder's vocalizations with sounds of her own. But this time, Thunder had something different in mind. The magnificent stallion approached Dr. Rodriguez and gently took the sleeve of her jacket in his teeth, guiding her to a specific position within the pattern. Then, in a gesture that left everyone present speechless, Thunder placed his head against her shoulder and began producing the most beautiful sounds anyone had ever heard from a horse. The vocalizations were hauntingly melodic, rising and falling, with emotional intensity that brought tears to the eyes of hardened researchers and stable hands alike. Thunder was singing, not the random neighing of an animal, but a genuine song filled with meaning and emotion that transcended species barriers. As Thunder sang, the other horses joined in with their own voices, creating a chorus that seemed to celebrate the breakthrough in communication and understanding that had been achieved. The sound filled the stable complex and echoed across the palace grounds, drawing crowds of staff members and even some members of the royal family who had come to witness this extraordinary moment. But the most remarkable moment came when Thunder suddenly stopped singing and began producing sounds that were unmistakably attempts at human speech. His first word was clear and deliberate. Marcus. The stable fell completely silent. Thunder had just spoken his handler's name with perfect clarity, demonstrating not just intelligence but the physical ability to mimic human language. Marcus stepped forward, tears streaming down his face as Thunder continued his attempt at verbal communication. Friend, Thunder said next, his equine vocal cords struggling with the unfamiliar sounds, but managing to make himself understood. Partner. Together. The implications were staggering. Thunder wasn't just intelligent, he was capable of learning human language and choosing to use it to express concepts of friendship and partnership that transcended the traditional boundaries between species. Dr. Rodriguez documented every word as Thunder's vocabulary expanded throughout the afternoon. He learned to say, "Thank you," "please," and even "love," expressing emotions and concepts that many had believed were uniquely human. His pronunciation was unusual, filtered through equine anatomy, but his meaning was unmistakable. The other horses began attempting speech as well, though with varying degrees of success. Duchess managed to say hello and gentle, while Storm surprised everyone by clearly pronouncing wisdom and remember. Wellington, true to his artistic nature, seemed more interested in the musical qualities of human speech, turning words into songs. As news of Thunder's breakthrough spread, the world watched in amazement. The palace received calls from heads of state, scientific institutions, and media outlets around the globe. Thunder had become more than just a horse. He was a symbol of the potential for understanding between species and the possibility that consciousness and intelligence existed in forms humanity had never recognized. The French president's state visit was postponed as the world focused on this unprecedented development. Thunder had inadvertently become the most famous horse in history, but he seemed to handle the attention with the same dignity he had always shown in his ceremonial duties. Captain Hayes worked with palace officials to develop new protocols for interacting with the now obviously sentient horses. Traditional training methods were replaced with educational partnerships, and the horses were given choices about their participation in ceremonial duties. To everyone's relief, Thunder and his companions chose to continue their roles as guard horses, but now they were recognized as volunteers rather than tools, partners rather than property. Thunder expressed through his new language abilities that he took pride in the traditions he helped maintain and wanted to continue serving the crown in his unique role. The final pattern Thunder created told the story of his transformation, from unaware animal to conscious being to bridge between species. At its completion, he added one final element, human handprints pressed into the straw alongside his own hoofprints, symbolizing the partnership and equality that had emerged from their extraordinary week together. Dr. Rodriguez's final report would reshape scientific understanding of animal consciousness and lead to revolutionary changes in how humans interacted with other species. But for Marcus, the most important outcome was much simpler. He had discovered that his beloved horse had always been not just an animal under his care, but a friend who cared for him in return. Thunder's outburst had begun as what appeared to be problematic behavior requiring correction. It ended as one of the most significant developments in the history of human-animal relations, proving that consciousness and intelligence could emerge in the most unexpected places and in the most extraordinary ways. The Royal Guard horses returned to their ceremonial duties, but everything had changed. They were no longer just magnificent animals performing trained behaviors. They were intelligent beings choosing to participate in traditions they valued, partners in pageantry who understood the meaning and importance of their role in British heritage. Thunder's transformation reminded the world that beneath the surface of every animal might exist a conscious being, capable of thought, emotion, and communication, far more complex than humans had ever imagined. His outburst became a breakthrough that opened new possibilities for understanding and cooperation between species, forever changing the relationship between humans and the animals who shared their world.